Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. And today I've got a fantastic guest for you coming out of Colorado, Terry Tucker. And he helps people find and live their uncommon and extraordinary lives through speaking and coaching. He's a man of reinvention, sports enthusiast, and with experience in marketing. And I'm really happy to have him on to share his wisdom and experience with the audience. So, Terry, welcome.
Christopher, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah. Start off by introducing yourself and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Sure, I'll try to give you, I'm old, so I've got a lot of experience to talk about. Grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually played college basketball at the Citadel despite having three knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. I was lucky. I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their market department. That was the good news. Bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After that, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. I thought they did such a great job with them that I wanted to be part of that. And then at 37, I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. Part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls' high school basketball. But for the last 12 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, you have quite a journey. So we'll talk about the overlying vibe I get from you is resilience. You've had to reinvent yourself. What advice do you have for someone who's burnt out and negative on the economy and all this, and they want to pivot, but they can't seem to?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I was a hospital administrator when I made that pivot, and I was 37 years old when I became a police officer, which for most people is pretty old to be getting into that line of work. But I guess I would say search your heart. What is it within you that you want out of life? And a lot of us feel, Christopher, I've seen so many people in my life that feel that they're born empty and that their job when they get out of school, whatever that looks like for them, is then to fill that empty self up. I've got to get the greatest job, make the most money, and have the nicest car, and live in the nicest house, and drive the latest or have the latest gadgets and gizmos. But what I found is we're not born empty. We're born full. We're born with everything we need to be successful already inside of us. We just need to find it, pull it out, and use it for our advantage. So I would say that our job in life should not be to fill ourselves up. Our job in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our families, of our friends, of our communities, and of our countries. So I guess I would ask the question, what are you passionate about that you want to serve? And find that, and then go attack that in some way in business or volunteering or something like that.
Really powerful, in which brings me to this power of purpose. And a lot of people, they say if you have a strong why, it'll keep going during really tough times. And so you mentioned the importance of living an uncommon and extraordinary life. And what does it mean to you to live with purpose? How can people actually discover their own unique purpose? Because I know a lot of people are walking around lost and confused.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we talk about purpose in this singular, like it's one thing. And at least in my life, I think that word is plural, is purpose is. I think when I was younger, my purpose literally was to be an athlete. And then as I got into adulthood, it shifted again to being in law enforcement. I really did feel that was my purpose in life and to be on the SWAT team. And now, in all honesty, as I'm probably coming towards the end of my life with my cancer and things like that, I think my purpose has switched again. So I guess I would go back to what I said earlier. what are your unique gifts and talents? What are the things that you enjoy doing, that you're good at, that you can't wait to get up in the morning and do? I think a lot of times we think that our purpose has to be aligned with our job. It doesn't. Your job could be over here. It's what you do to pay the bills, but your purpose is over here, and it's to write or to speak or to get into marketing or whatever it is you feel that's in your heart. And I'll say this, I usually say this to young people, but I think it applies to all of us. If there's something in your heart, if there's something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah, it's always important things have always tugged at me. And if I ignore it, or if I, then the universe like kicks me on my feet, or like brings in something to like get me out of that. One thing is, I was listening to this interview and they were talking about just like Olympians and Olympic gold medalists or the absolute greats. And you think like, you think in those really, those lowest moments, like in there, it's so easy to be tough and when everything is good, but when everything is going bad, like your health or your finances or anything, how do you train your mind to override all of that negativity? And how do you pull it within yourself? What can people learn from your mental strategies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess I would recommend to your audience, and this is something I do every day. So it's not something I do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. I do this every day. Do one thing that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our job or our business fails, or we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you'll be so much more resilient to handle those things than people that never step outside their comfort zones and do things that are uncomfortable. I'll give you, I'm really going to date myself now, but back in 1976, it was our country's bicentennial celebration. It was also my 16th birthday year. And there was an Olympic gold medal winning swimmer by the name of Shirley Babishoff, who had one of the simplest, greatest quotes that I ever heard. And this is what she said: winners think about what they want to happen. Losers think about what they don't want to happen. So winners can override their negative brains and focus on the things that they want to occur, whereas losers can't see the value of pursuing a goal or a dream. And I love the quote from Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world, the Jamaican sprinter. He said, "I trained 4 years to run 9 seconds. And so many people give up on their dreams after only a couple months."
Very powerful. Yeah. Puts everything in perspective, that 9 seconds. Yeah. The other thing is, what I've always been interested in military, like the Navy SEALs and like these special ops. And you were a former SWAT hostage negotiator. And there's this really great book, Never Split the Difference.
Chris Boss, yeah.
Yeah. In these high pressure situations, how do you like, there's just chaos and you have to like, and there's lives, there's money, there could be a lot of things. How do you keep calm in that, in those situations when emotions are just running high and stakes are high?
I think the same way that doctors, lawyers, dentists, professionals do, you practice. And we did. We practiced, we trained a lot on different scenarios. We had a psychologist that was attached to our team that, and where we really learned is a debriefing in those different scenarios. Psychologists may look at you and say, "Did you ever think that person might have had schizophrenia and they were off their medicine?" And oh, shoot, no, I never thought about that, and things like that. And I remember when I started, I remember I was given a formula, and that formula has to do with how we as human beings communicate with each other. And the formula was 7, 38, 55. So 7% of how we communicate a message are the words that we use. And think how many times you've said something and you're like, "Oh, I wish I hadn't said that," or "I wish I would have said that in a different way." That's only 7% of how that message gets communicated. 38% is the tone of voice that we use. Are we calm? Are we really excited? Are we down and depressed? However, that tone of voice is 38%. And then more than half, 55% of how we communicate a message with each other is our body language and our facial expressions. And the reason they gave that to us was because when we were negotiating, if somebody had a gun or they were barricaded or something like that, we were not in the room with them. So we didn't have the luxury of that 55% of saying something to somebody and them kind of rolling their eyes and, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe he said that to me. And that's an incredibly important understanding of how we communicate. And the other thing I'll say about is this. We used to use what was called tactical empathy. I think you can get rid of the word tactical and just talk about empathy. In other words, if we're on scene, and there were a lot of times we were on scene, having no idea why we were there, what caused this person to do what they did. And so you would start out with something like, hey, Christopher, I'm Terry. What are we doing here? What's going on? Help me to understand what's coming across, why you're doing what you're doing. And again, the important word there is understand. If you were a homicide suspect that just killed 3 people, I wasn't going to agree with you, but I think that's the issue. We don't listen to understand. We listen to respond. So spend more time listening to what the other person's saying before you want to jump in there with your 2 cents. You can tell I like to talk, but I also am pretty good at listening to what people are saying.
Yeah. That's one of the hardest skills to learn was like stepping into that other person's shoes, like and then because you have to get away from your ego and all of that is one of the hardest skills, but very powerful skill. What role does faith and trust and play a role in your ability to navigate your toughest battles?
Yeah, I think faith is incredibly and trust is incredibly important. I mean, if you think about what we were doing as negotiators, we were trying to develop trust, to build trust with another human being who, one, we've never met before in our lives, and two, is probably having the worst day of their life. If you're talking to me and your house is surrounded by the police, you're not having a good day whatsoever. So faith and trust are incredibly important. But I'll look at it from my perspective as a negotiator. About 90% of the time, our team was successful in getting the hostages out or getting the barricaded person out safely. About 10% of the time, it wasn't the case. The person decided usually to end their life. And a lot of times that had to do with, as I said, if you were a homicide suspect and you knew you were caught, you were going to spend the rest of your life in prison. And they weren't going to do that. So they were just going to end their life now. And I don't mean to sound callous about this, but I never lost any sleep over that. And the reason I didn't was because number one, I had good training. Number two, I worked with incredibly dedicated people that were helping to get this person out. And number three, I knew I did everything I possibly could to get this person out safely. But at the end of the day, it was really their decision how that went. So understanding, go back to the empathy part of it. Empathy builds trust, and trust gets me to a point where I built up that trust to a point where I can get them out safely. So it would be hours a lot of times where we would be talking about something over here when the real issue was over here, but I hadn't built up that trust with the person enough for them to tell me what the real reason was why we were there. So one of the other things we used to do, and I'll just throw this out, is we used how and what questions. We stayed away from why questions. For example, why questions sound accusatory. If I said, Christopher, why did you wear that shirt today? You might be like, oh, wait a minute. Does he not like it? Is he judging me? I can get to that same answer by saying, hey, Christopher, what made you wear that shirt today? That's a little less of an intrusive question that gets me to the same answer. So how and what questions are a little softer than why questions are.
Yeah, I love that. You wrote a book, Sustainable Excellence, and then talk about that and talk about living a life of significance versus a life of success. And how can people pursue significance as opposed to success?
Sure. So Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, is really a book born out of 2 conversations I have. I really never wanted to write a book. I never expected to write a book. There's an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never told me to write a book or anything like that. But I think what he did was put enough people in my path that started to make the same suggestion over and over. That's happened to me several times in my life. And I think I'm smart enough now that when that happens, I should pay attention to it. So I had these two conversations. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school. I coached girls' high school basketball while we lived in Houston. And she had moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And Christopher, I ended up saying to her after dinner that I was really excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason or the reasons you were put on the face of this earth. And there are a reason or reasons, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college reach out to me on social media. And he asked me what I thought were the most important things he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him that get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we all know. I spent some time taking some notes and eventually had these sort of 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally, unfortunately, during COVID, I had my leg amputated as a result of my cancer. And so while I was healing during that 4 or 5 month period, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and the real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
How can people find out more about you and see the work that you do? Very inspiring and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So I have a website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. With that thought, usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply it into your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Awesome. And what an inspiring conversation. And for the audience, be sure to check out Terry's socials, give him a follow. And thanks so much for coming on.
Christopher, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed talking with you.